Hi, I'm Matt Retz. Welcome to my channel. Back in the day, I had a big pedal board with wah pedal and compressor and drive pedals and a reverb and all of that stuff. And I would just plug in the guitar to the beginning of the pedal board, plug another cable into the end of the pedal board, and run it straight into my boogie. It sounded okay. Somewhere along the line, I learned that if you take those time-based effects, the reverbs, the choruses, the delays, and you put them through the loop on the back, it sounds a whole lot better. So I started doing that, and indeed it sounded a lot better. However, it was a lot of cables. It was also a lot of pedals on my pedal board. So a few years later, I picked up a Helix. And honestly, I use it every gig now. Some gigs, I don't even take the amp, but most of the time I'm playing with a Helix, my Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, and I set up the 4-cable method. Now there was a problem where those time-based effects going through the loop on the boogie would start to feed on themselves and make just this terrible sound. Did some research, found out the reason is because the boogie has a effects loop on it that is in parallel. Well, parallel doesn't work real well because the sound goes back into it and feeds back, and it just keeps reverbing on the reverb and delaying on the delay. So instead, I made a modification to the effects loop to make it serial. There's lots of videos and articles out on the web on how to do this. If you've got an old boogie that you want to update that way, I highly suggest it. It's not hard. Anyhow, today what I want to show you is how I use the Helix with the boogie in a 4-cable method. Now, you can do that with any amp that has an effects loop on it. I just happen to have a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier that I've had since 1994. After we're done showing you traditionally how we did it, I'm going to show you how you can do the same thing, but instead of using 4 cables, you use 1. Okay, so here we go. Let's set it up just like we did back in the day. I'm going to start by connecting a single guitar into the input on the Helix. So if we spin this around here, we can see right here is the guitar in. So we're going to plug into that. That will go into my guitar. In this case, I'm actually going to go into my wife's guitar that was built by her brother, Paul Miller. This is Goldie, and Goldie is a fine, fine Telecaster. From there, we're going to go out. We're going to first go out one of the sends, and we're going to go out that send and into the input on the boogie. So that's cable number 2. And keeping in mind, the farther away your pedal board is from your amp on the stage, the longer your cables are and the bigger the mess it ends up being. So here's our sends, and that's going to go over here to my input on the boogie. Now we're going to go out the back of the boogie. So I'll spin the boogie around here. And you'll see we have send and return on the loop. So I'm going to plug my yellow cable into the send on the Boogie, and that is going to go to the return on the Helix. So now the signal has gone from the guitar into the Helix, which runs it through any of the effects that I want before the preamp, out the send loop from the Helix into the front end of the amp. From there, it's going to go out the send of the effects loop on the amp and into the return on the Helix. Now I'll take the blue cable, and the blue cable will go from the output, the 1/4 inch output on the Helix, into the return on the Boogie. Okay, so cable 1, guitar to the Helix. Cable 2, Helix send to Boogie input. Number 3, Boogie send to Helix return. And number 4, Helix output to the Boogie return, which then goes through the power amp. Okay, so that's 4 cables. There's actually a 5th cable that I want to deal with too. That one normally will plug into the front of the amp, right here where it says foot switch, and it changes the channels on the Boogie. And so here we'll plug it into the 30-year-old foot switch that came with the Boogie, and that will change it from the clean channel to the dirty channel. Nice thing about the Line 6 Helix, though, is that it actually has an extension amp control right here. So I can take this out of here and I can put it into here. And I can control the channel switching from the Helix. Okay? So let's see how this works. Now I have a patch that I obviously set up for this 4-cable method. And I will post that so that you can get it for free. I will probably ask for an email address just so I can make sure that I've got a real person that I'm sending it to. But this has overdrives, it has a looper, it has a Leslie on it, and a couple of other little tricks. So let's see here. Let's see if I did this right. So far, so good. We got sound. We always like to have sound. One more thing here. I'm going to all right. So let's see. Here's pretty dry. Here's with overdrive. Little chorus. Well, that's supposed to be reverb, but it sounds like I need to add a little bit of that. One thing I forgot is I've got it on bypass loop, and I need to have that on. There we go. Now, so that's the reverb. Simple delay. And all of those effects are in the back end on the loop. The overdrive that is before the preamp. One other really cool thing with this particular patch is that you can replace the Boogie preamp with the preamp of your choice. In this case, I think I have a Marshall by clicking this button. What it does is it takes that loop out of the loop in the Helix out of the equation, so it doesn't go into the preamp here. Instead, it goes through here, puts a modeled preamp in, and then goes out into the power amp section. So that's a kind of cool thing, and actually it did save me once when I had a tube go out in my preamp at a gig, and I was able to change over to the modeled preamp and play the whole gig with a Marshall instead of a Boogie, but that worked just fine. So that's what it is, but as you might be able to see, it's a bit of a mess. Didn't really care for the 4-cable method because there were a lot of cables on the floor at my feet. I did do some things where I bundled up a bunch of cables together and had them run out, but then you have this thing that's about this big around running all across the stage for you to trip on. So I thought there had to be a better way and a faster way. That's what I'm going to show you next. Okay, so what sorcery am I going to use to get all of that done with 1 cable instead of 4? Well, I built these little boxes. One goes on the Boogie and the other goes with my Helix. And you'll see on each of them I've labeled them with my very fancy label maker, and it tells me exactly what needs to be plugged in where. We would still run a cable from the guitar to the Helix, or you can use a wireless. That'll eliminate even that. So that's what I'm going to do in this case. But that cable doesn't have to make the run back to the amp. It just goes into the Helix. And then from there, the next signal will be on the Helix. We're going to turn this around so we can see it again. All right. So we've got 4 cables. We've got the 1/4 inch out, which is going to go here. We've got the return, which is going to go here. We've got the send, which is going to go here. And then to control the channel switching, we have the external amp, which is going to go here. Okay? So that's those 4 cables. Then on the Boogie side of things, we've got the foot switch, and then around the back, have the return and the send, and back on the front we have the input. Okay, that's great, but how am I getting the signal from there to there? Well, that's where this comes in. It's an Ethernet jack. You can just use a Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable to run from here to here. Let me grab one. Now this one's pretty short because I've got them set up right next to each other. And you notice that I also made them so that they can lock in there if I get the right cable. But any Cat 5 or Cat 6 works. So now, when I set up, I have one cable that runs from the Helix back to the Boogie. Okay, let's talk a minute about the boxes themselves and how I made them. I bought basic project boxes. They're often used for stomp boxes and things like that. Drilled 4 holes in the side for the 1/4-inch jacks, a hole in the end for the Ethernet jack. Used regular tip sleeve 1/4-inch jacks. I did use a stereo jack, a TRS jack, for the amp control. However, ended up not using it that way and just wired it as if it was tip sleeve anyhow. The reason that I did do that was the Helix actually has a stereo jack on the amp extension. And so you could use a Cat 6 cable, and those would carry an additional line, and then you could control 2 things through that. And one example of that would be that you could use that, split it out on the other end at the amp end, and turn the loop on and off remotely. I decided that wasn't functionality that I was going to use, so 4 regular mono 1/4-inch jacks were sufficient. I then just took a short patch cable that I had and cut it, stripped off all of the insulation, and you end up with 4 pairs of wires. So it doesn't really matter which ones go where, as long as on both boxes they are wired identically. So in my case, I put the blue and the blue stripe down here at the bottom, and that is the one for the return. The brown and the brown stripe for the send. The green, or excuse me, the orange and the orange stripe for the input, and the green stripe for the foot switch. That just plugs into this Ethernet jack. All of that gets put in here. Now I will say, be careful when you drill these holes. You can see mine aren't perfectly even. That can cause a problem if these 2 are too close together. Anytime that metal touches that metal, you're in trouble. You're going to short out. So you want to make sure that you've got these spaced appropriately. Give yourself a little room here so that you can wind things around. Make sure you have enough extra cable that you can cut it to the length that you need as you're building this thing. And really, it's as simple as that. Both boxes are identical. That way, whatever goes into the top here comes out of the top on the other one. You'll see that they line up. So when I run the guitar into the Helix, and then the Helix send, so again, on the side I labeled this one's the Helix send is going to go to the input on the amp.
and then the amps send is going to go to the return on the Helix, and then the Helix out is going to go to the return on the amp. And then the foot switch obviously goes to the foot switch. And it's as simple as that. So I will put a picture or something in that you can download on, in the description here. But that's pretty much all that you have to do.
Okay, let's see if it works. Change the channel. So as you can see, that all works. One cable running between here and here. So much cleaner.
All right, here's the Helix patch I'm using for both the standard 4-cable method and the 1-cable setup. First of all, a quick shout out to Richie Castellano, Jason Sadides, I hope I'm saying that right, Jason. If not, I'm sorry. And Steve Sterlacci. Those guys all helped me wrap my head around this Helix stuff when I first got into it. If you're not already watching those channels, you really should be. So let's take a look at the patch. Here's the layout. We start with the guitar in and then hit a wah block right up front. Now we've got a distortion. I use the Top Secret overdrive here, but honestly there's a lot of them that are really good. The Minotaur is really good. You use whatever you like. Then in the mod I've got the 70s chorus because no chorus sounds better than a 1970s chorus. And then we hit the key. This is the FX loop. That's where we split the chain to send out to the amp and return the amp's preamp signal back into the Helix. So whether you're running the 4 separate cables or my 1-cable setup, it doesn't matter. This right here, this block is the hub. All right. Then we go to the preamp. Now you'll notice that the preamp is turned off by default, or at least it should be. There we go. Turns off by default because you'd want the Boogie's preamp normally. But when you step on that switch, that'll turn that on and at the same time turn off the effects loop. So if it turns off the effects loop, then it's not going to go out to the Boogie's preamp and come back from the preamp. It's just going to bypass that and it's going to replace it with whatever preamp you choose for this block. In this case, we've got this Grammatico. It's a high gain amp. It sounds great, but you can use the Marshall. I've done that before. There are so many great sounding amps in the Helix. So use whichever one you want. That's the one that I've got in the patch. After that, we have the volume pedal. I know a lot of people will put the volume pedal up front. I like the volume pedal right here because that way, whatever tone is already set, and I'm just making that tone louder or quieter, I can control how much overdrive I'm getting, how much I'm driving the preamp from the volume controls on my guitar. I don't need the volume pedal for that. So that's why I have that volume pedal where I do. Okay, after that, it jumps down here and it goes to a compressor. And then after the compressor, it jumps over here to a Leslie, basically a rotary drum horn. I use this. I put this in here because I had a couple of songs that I am covering that needed a Leslie. So there it is. After that, I have just the simple digital delay. You can tap the tempo on it and it will just keep up with you, and it's fantastic for use on a lot of things. And after that, I have reverb. In this patch, I just have a basic room reverb. It works great. There's a lot of great reverbs in here too. So, you know, play around, find what you like, but that's the reverb that I have. Then it comes back up and it goes to the looper. Honestly, I don't use the looper a whole lot. I probably should use it more, start playing with it because it's a lot of fun. But I put it on here just because it's a lot of fun. So, you know, your mileage may vary. If you like it, great. If you don't, feel free to replace it with something else. It does take up a little of the processing power. So you can, if you remove that, you can throw something else in there that you really love. So then after that, another important thing is your output. You want your output to actually go to the 1/4 inch output. You could go to the multi, I suppose, but the 1/4 inch output is important because that is running back into your amp, power amp stage. I'll put the diagrams for all of this in the notes. Please like and subscribe for more of this kind of stuff, some performance videos, and we'll see you later. Thanks.